Yo, what's up? I know it's been a long time, but today in this Dungeon Quest video, I'm going to be ranking every single dungeon from worst to best. And I thought it'd be a nice thing to do, because I'm not going to be doing 100 rounds of any dungeon ever again. But yeah, I'm going to be ranking these dungeons based on stuff like enjoyability, how they look, weapons, music, all that stuff. But anyways, like last time, let's get into it. Well, first, I doubt any of you are going to be surprised with this, but it's got to be the Legacy Desert Temple. It's bland, boring, and super unpolished. The music is mid, the gear doesn't look good, and the enemies are just R15 avatars with sand textures smacked onto them. One of the things that I really hate about this dungeon is the fact that you have to guess which way to go. It's just a lot of unnecessary effort, and that's why it's at the bottom of my list. And my second worst dungeon, it has to be the Underworld. Like bro, it's so long and boring, and man, don't get me started on the enemies. Like, they're so ugly. The bosses look like aliens, especially the first one. Like, I can go on forever. The music is okay, and the gear looks alright as well. But that's all I have to say. They do really need to recreate this dungeon. This one is a jump, but next I'm placing the Legacy Winter Outpost. It's actually pretty fun, and I like the music a lot. It's just more the same with the enemies though. They're kind of boring, and you have to play this dungeon for such a long time before getting to Pirate Island, which does lead on to my next ranking. Pirate Island is where we start getting better though. Like, I remember getting so excited to start this dungeon after playing Winter Outpost for so long. Anyway, the dungeon is really fun, but it's really long, so it takes a while to beat. I also do like the concept of the bosses, especially the big spider, and the music is also decent. However, like a lot of the older dungeons, the gear isn't really good looking. This one might be weird, but I'm gonna go with the current desert temple. The gear looks really nice, and the dungeon looks good as well. It's just kind of boring, because the mobs barely do any damage to you. I get they're like trying to make the game more accessible, but they should make it a little harder, so you're not mindlessly playing the dungeon. But now, it's got to the stage where all the other dungeons are so good that the ones placed low aren't necessarily bad. There's just other dungeons that are better than them. Steampunk Sewers is just... It's pretty fun and I like the idea, but it's just kind of dark and like weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's more of a filler dungeon in my opinion, and it gets boring now that the old boss raids are removed, because you have to get through 15 levels instead of the usual 10. The thing with this dungeon is that it's so unbalanced. Like, the difference between Insane and Nightmare is so much that when you have the leg and some decent armor, you can one-shot all the mobs and they barely do any damage to you. If they rebalance the dungeon and make some changes to the leveling, it would 100% be higher on the list, because the gear is really nice and so is the music. Next we got King's Castle. I really do like this dungeon, and it's a huge step up from Pirate Island. Anyway, it's fun, it looks good, the music is awesome, and the bosses are unique for its time. Like, I feel so cool when I'm dodging the mage boss. I don't particularly have anything bad to say about this dungeon apart from its length. This one is controversial, but I'm placing Yokai Peak at number 12. Don't get me wrong, the dungeon looks amazing, and I think it's probably the best looking in the game. However, that's basically the only good thing. I don't want to go on a rant, but this dungeon is so flawed. The progression, the length, the drop rates, the spells, the XP, basically all the gameplay aspects of this dungeon are really, really bad. I understand that this was Voldex's first ever dungeon, but dude, it was so disappointing. Number 11 is Orbital Outpost. It's a pretty creative dungeon, and I do really like the vibe it gives. The music is cool and so is the gear, but the only bad thing about the dungeon is that it's quite short, so it can be boring over time. However, I do like the design of the bosses, especially the last one, and the enemies are nice as well. One quick thing though, if you do like the video, give it a like and maybe consider subbing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Now we got Volcanic Chambers, and I gotta say bro, I have such mixed feelings towards this dungeon. The gear is alright and I like the cosmetic. The dungeon is also pretty detailed and polished, but the one biggest thing I hate about Volcanic Chambers is the freaking progression, bro. Dude, like, it's such a snooze fest. I would rather do anything else but play this dungeon ever again. The only reason I placed this higher than I did is because it introduced the inner focus, inner rage concept. But other than that, this dungeon would be so much lower. Aquatic Temple is kind of similar to how I feel about Volcanic Chambers. The dungeon is so good looking. I love the music and it's so nostalgic to me. The gear looks great as well, especially the Triton armor. And I love the enemies and their attacks. Some things I don't like though are the spawn points. Like bro, I don't need you to spawn me on the other side of the map. It's really long, so you never often get good drops because you're spending too long completing the dungeon. Also, the last boss is probably one of the hardest in the game, and it's completely locked, so even if you were good at dodging, you're nearly guaranteed to take damage. Next is the current Winter Outpost. I think this dungeon is so cool. The gear, the new enemies, the bosses, bro, I think Voldex actually cooked. It's such an improvement from the Legacy version, and it's better in every single way. I also really like how whenever you beat the dungeon, you still have a chance to get items from the old one. Now we got Abyssal Void, and I'm actually gonna say it, I really like this dungeon. It's so much better than Yokai Peak, like in every way, and I love the concept of it being basically the opposite of Gilded Skies. I love the ultimate boss, the ambience, the music, the entities, and the spells too. I know everyone talks about how the legendary spells are bad, and I do kind of agree, but I couldn't really care less to be honest. The only bad things in this dungeon are the XP and how hard the dungeon actually is. The bosses are harder than anything seen before bro, and it's impossible to do in hardcore, let alone mobile. Samurai Palace is such a step up from the underworld. Like, the map is so beautiful and the bosses are ahead of its time. It's also the first dungeon to introduce speed spells, and I think it's so cool for that. Now for our top 5, Northern Lands. I absolutely love this dungeon. It's so good, I don't even care what you guys say. The gear, the vibe, the bonus boss, the map, the ultimates, and the music, bro. Who let this guy make a movie trailer song for a Roblox game? He's actually so underrated. This dungeon could be the worst thing ever and still make top 10 just because of the songs. But dude, go give this guy the subscribers he needs. He really deserves it. Also, I nearly forgot to mention how fun the bonus boss is, and the music for it too. It's actually amazing. Here, I'm placing the canals. And dude, I actually love this dungeon so much. I don't have a single bad word to say about it. V Cafe really saw this genre and made this masterpiece, bro. The vibe it gives is so awesome. I love the spells, the gear, the music, the bosses, the enemies. I could go on. I think it's trying to replicate Venice, you know, the city in Italy, and it's perfect. I don't even care if I'm glazing this dungeon, because it deserves it. Ghastly Harbour is surprisingly very controversial, and personally, I don't see why. It's so detailed and well made, and I can tell there was a lot of thought put into it. I love the legendaries, and I really love the spells. The music is okay, and the only bad thing about this dungeon is that it's really long, but at least it's balanced, since the progression is fast enough so you don't really notice it. The bosses are probably the coolest I've seen in any dungeon so far. Especially the Kraken. Like, why is it so good? Number 2, Gilded Skies. I love everything about this dungeon. Like, it's actually perfect, and it's such an awesome ending to V Cafe's time with the game. I don't know how to explain it, but part of me wishes this was the last dungeon. It would have been such a good ending to one of my favorite games ever. Everything from the bosses, the entities, the gear, and the map is perfection. Oh yeah, and the music, of course. I think the music in this dungeon is the best of any by far. Like, I feel as if it would belong better in Star Wars. Anyway, the moral of the story is, this dungeon is great. And unsurprisingly, for our number 1 spot, I'm placing Enchanted Forest. This dungeon is beautiful, and it sticks to its theme so well, bro. The length is perfect, the music is obviously perfect. It's flawless, detailed, and it looks complete, like nothing else really needs to be added. The armor and weapons look amazing, same with the mobs, and I love all their mechanics. The dungeon is balanced, something which we don't really see in this game, and I've enjoyed playing it every single time. It's also one of those dungeons where mage and warrior are basically equal, and I love it for that. And we're done. Thank you so much for sticking to the end, guys. Comment down below if you agreed to my ranking or not. I'd love to see what you think. Remember to like, subscribe, do all that stuff, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time.